New York City. April 19, 1989. A brutal attack in Central Park shocked the entire nation. The city was loud, restless, on edge. Crime rates were high. Headlines were brutal. Politicians were under pressure. The public was afraid. And on that spring night, inside Central Park, something happened that would ignite a firestorm across America. A 28-year-old investment banker went for her routine evening jog. She never came home. By sunrise, she was found barely alive, severely beaten, unconscious, and left in the darkness. The attack was described as savage. News stations interrupted regular programming. The words were immediate. Wilding. Teen gangs. Chaos in the park. Within 48 hours, police announced they had suspects. 5 teenagers. 4 black. 1 Latino. The city exhaled. Case closed. Except it wasn't. Because years later, the truth would unravel everything. And America would be forced to confront a terrifying possibility. What if the justice system got it completely wrong? To understand what happened, you have to understand New York in 1989. The late 1980s were defined by fear. Homicides were at historic highs. Crack cocaine had ravaged communities. Headlines constantly warned of youth crime and violence. Central Park, though iconic, was not the safe tourist attraction it is today. At night, it carried a reputation for danger. Politicians were campaigning on toughness. Law enforcement faced intense scrutiny. The public wanted action. And when the attack occurred, it wasn't just a crime. It became symbolic. It became political. The victim, later identified publicly as Trisha Meili, was young, successful, white, and working in finance. The narrative was powerful. A young professional woman attacked in one of the country's most famous parks. National media picked it up instantly. The pressure to solve it wasn't subtle. It was explosive. That same night, police detained multiple teenagers in the park. Some had been involved in minor disturbances earlier that evening. Most were simply there, hanging out. Eventually, investigators focused on 5 boys. Antron McCray, Kevin Richardson, Yusef Salaam, Raymond Santana, Corey Wise. They were between 14 and 16 years old. They were separated, interrogated, held for hours, some for nearly an entire day. No video cameras recorded the full interrogations. Only the final statements. And those statements would become the cornerstone of the prosecution's case. But something wasn't right. The confessions didn't line up. Details differed. Timelines conflicted. Descriptions of the attack contradicted each other. Yet those inconsistencies were not emphasized publicly. What was emphasized was this: they confessed. And confession, to the public, equals guilt. The media storm was relentless. Tabloids ran front-page headlines using phrases like "Wolf Pack." Television news replayed confession clips repeatedly. The word "wilding" became a cultural phenomenon overnight. Public opinion hardened rapidly. There were calls for severe punishment. Political ads referenced the case. One full-page newspaper advertisement even called for the reinstatement of the death penalty. The narrative was already decided. 5 violent teens attacked an innocent woman. The public rarely heard that. No DNA matched the boys. No physical evidence placed them at the specific crime scene. Their stories were inconsistent. Instead, what people saw were videotaped confessions. And once a confession enters public consciousness, it's nearly impossible to erase. The trials were split into 2 groups. Prosecutors leaned heavily on the confessions. Defense attorneys argued coercion. Experts debated interrogation tactics. But DNA evidence from the crime scene failed to match any of the 5 teenagers. That fact was known during the trial. Yet prosecutors argued the attack involved multiple participants, suggesting the actual perpetrator could have been someone else among a larger group. The jury deliberated. And ultimately, convictions came down. Sentences ranged from 5 to 15 years. Teenagers were sent to prison. The city moved forward. The case was considered solved. But beneath the surface, doubt lingered. Prison changes people. Especially teenagers. Each of the 5 served significant time. Corey Wise, tried as an adult, endured harsher conditions. They maintained their innocence. Appeals were filed. Denied. Life moved on for the city. But not for them. Meanwhile, advances in forensic science continued to evolve. DNA testing improved. Databases expanded. And then, more than a decade later, something unexpected happened. In 2002, a man named Matias Reyes was serving a life sentence in a New York prison. He was already a convicted serial rapist and murderer. And he approached prison authorities with something unexpected. He said he had information about the 1989 Central Park case. More specifically, he said he committed the attack alone. At first, investigators were skeptical. The case had been closed for years. 5 men had already served time. Public memory had moved on. But Reyes provided details. Specific details. Details that had never been made public. Investigators decided to test his claim the only way they could. DNA. The biological evidence collected from the crime scene in 1989 had been preserved. When compared to Reyes, it matched. Not partially. Not vaguely. It matched conclusively. And it did not match any of the 5 men who had been convicted. Not then. Not now. Not ever. The foundation of the original case began to crack. The Manhattan District Attorney's Office reopened the case. They reviewed interrogation transcripts. They reviewed trial records. They reviewed DNA reports. And they re-examined something that had been visible from the beginning. The confessions never aligned with the forensic evidence. Reyes' account did. He described acting alone. The physical evidence supported that. There was no DNA evidence indicating multiple attackers. The theory that the 5 teenagers had participated in a group assault was no longer supported by the science. In December 2002, the convictions were officially vacated. All charges were dismissed. The 5 men were legally exonerated. More than a decade after being labeled violent criminals. More than a decade after losing their teenage years. They walked out with clean records. But the question lingered. How did this happen in the first place? Confession evidence is powerful. Studies have shown that juries give enormous weight to a confession, even when told it may have been coerced. But research also shows that false confessions occur. Particularly among juveniles. Teenagers are more susceptible to authority pressure, suggestion, fatigue, fear, the desire to go home. Interrogations in 1989 often lasted hours. Breaks were not always documented. Parents were sometimes not present for extended periods. Only the final statements were recorded. Not the full interrogation process. And once a narrative is established, once the public hears, they confessed, it becomes extraordinarily difficult to undo. In this case, the confessions shaped the entire investigation. Instead of evidence leading to suspects, the suspects shaped the interpretation of the evidence. That reversal would later become a focal point for criminal justice reform advocates. The case did not unfold in a vacuum. It unfolded under bright lights. Television coverage was intense. Tabloids amplified fear. Political voices demanded accountability. The language used in headlines was inflammatory. Terms like "wolf pack" created imagery before trial evidence was even presented. In high-profile cases, public perception can move faster than facts. And when the public demands answers, institutions feel pressure to provide them. That pressure can shape investigations. It can shape prosecutorial decisions. It can shape juries. In hindsight, many observers questioned whether the environment of 1989 made a fair trial nearly impossible. Because once a narrative spreads, it rarely retreats quietly. Exoneration does not restore lost time. It does not erase trauma. It does not rewind adolescence. The five men emerged into a world very different from the one they left. Technology had changed. Society had changed. But stigma lingered. Some struggled to find employment. Some struggled psychologically. Years of incarceration leave marks that legal documents cannot erase. In 2003, they filed a civil lawsuit against the city of New York. They alleged wrongful conviction and violations of civil rights. The case moved slowly. Years passed. Negotiations stalled. Political leadership changed. Public opinion shifted again. Finally, in 2014, the city agreed to a settlement. $41 million. Divided among the five men. It was one of the largest wrongful conviction settlements in New York history. But financial compensation cannot quantify lost childhoods, or lost opportunities, or lost trust. New generations learned about it not as a solved crime, but as a cautionary tale. Was it malicious intent? Was it tunnel vision? Was it systemic bias? Was it the weight of public pressure? Wrongful convictions rarely result from a single mistake. They often result from a chain reaction. An assumption. A confession. A reinforced narrative. A courtroom battle shaped by emotion. And once the machine starts moving, it becomes difficult to stop. In this case, the justice system corrected itself. But only after years had passed. And only because DNA evidence forced it to. Without DNA, would the convictions have stood forever?